Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining me again today. My name is Dr. Anneline Padayachee and I'm the Director of the Food and Nutrition Doctor. Now, on today's webisode, we are going to be covering off the basics of the gut microbiota. Yep, we're talking bacteria, we're talking flatulence, we're talking baked beans, we're bringing out the big guns. And this is actually my favorite area of the human body, so I'm very excited to be sharing this part of human anatomy and nutrition with you. Now, for most people, when we mention the terminology, the gut microbiota, truth is, whether you're in the food industry or the general public, most people don't really understand it. And you have to realize that nutrition as a science is relatively new. We're only about 220, 230 years old in comparison with anatomy that is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years old. Having said that, the human gut microbiota and how we ferment things inside of our body to get nutrition, as well as the impact on our immune system and brain function and our whole body's function, is relatively new. It is very new, and we're still understanding and we're still exploring and trying to work out how these bacteria all work. So in order to understand this terminology a bit more, it's really important for us to realize what we're talking about. And what we're talking about is bacteria that live in our colon, bacteria that live in our large bowel. So in this picture, you can see the stomach, which has got big red flowers and yellow squiggly lines in it. And then you've got the small intestine, which in this picture doesn't have anything in it. But then we've got the colon, and it's got the little blue little circles, a couple of red dots, two or three little yellow squiggly lines. That colon is where most of our bacteria is housed. That is the main organ that we're talking about when we talk about the gut microbiota. Now, it's really important to understand the terminologies of bacteria, or microbiome, and probiotic, and also prebiotic. And by the time you get to the end of this, I am pretty sure you'll have a good appreciation of those concepts. Now, the word probiotic first started coming into the world at the end of the 1800s, 1900s, yeah? And how bacteria play a role on human health became of interest to researchers around the turn of the 1900s because they were fascinated in centenarians. So in this picture over here, we've got some photographs of centenarians, and it was a project on people over the age of 100 by the photographer Carsten Thormelen. You can go online and have a look at this project. It's really quite cool to see images of people over the age of 100. And you can honestly say, like, these people here in this picture, they look pretty good. Some of them are like 103, 106. And yeah, and it tells you a little bit about their story. But the truth is, there are some population groups, some countries that actually have a high proportion of centenarians, so people over the age of 100. And I'm not talking about people who are sitting in an old age home or are unfortunately in aged care facilities, or invalid or have dementia, but people who are over the age of 100, cognitive, totally switched on, physically moving, taking care of themselves. Now, the world leaders for centenarians is Japan. Japan has the most number of centenarians per capita. The second highest proportion of centenarians is actually in Bulgaria. Yes, Bulgaria, a little country in Europe that has a high proportion of centenarians. And it is the Bulgarians, their centenarians, and their high intake of yogurt that kind of brought this whole prebiotic, probiotic, and gut bacteria thing into the world. So the story goes, yogurt in our history of human dietary consumption, it's believed to be in the human diet anywhere between 9,000 to 6,000 years BC. When animals started being domesticated for milk production. There is evidence in Egyptian hieroglyphics of fermented milk products. What those fermented milk products mean, we don't really know. But when we're talking about dairy in the ancient world, both ancient Europe and ancient Egyptian, I'm talking about camel milk, sheep milk, goat milk, cow milk, horse milk, anything except for humans. That could be milked, animals that were domesticated and milked to provide food for sustenance to the village, to the community. Now, in those eras back then, they didn't have refrigeration, they didn't have preservatives. So whatever milk products that they did have and they did produce, it wasn't pasteurized. So it came with all the good stuff and possibly all the bad stuff. And so fermentation was a way that food could last longer. They didn't have refrigerators. So by default, anything that had high protein content and could be a source of energy for bacteria would by default be fermented. They just didn't know what was going on. That's all. It wasn't until much later on that yogurt, the word yogurt actually comes from the Turkish word yog and yurmak, which means to thicken, coagulate, or to curdle. Now, there's actually evidence in Ayurvedic texts from around 6000 BC of fermented dairy products in which the archaeologists believe they were talking about yogurt, thickened, coagulated dairy products. It's well known that the Greeks and also the Roman emperors were first to mention the consumption of eating thickened, coagulated dairy products. So we're thinking yogurt as both, a really decadent food for the wealthy, but some of them also believed it to have superstitious powers. So yogurt, fermented dairy products have been around for a very, very, very long time. But the Turks, historically, according to the archaeology findings, were the first to evaluate yogurt's medicinal use and actually consume it to treat illnesses, especially associated with diarrhea, an upset tummy, cramping, and also to alleviate the discomfort caused by sunburn. So yogurt's been around for a long time, and it's been well known that it's been fermented. Genghis Khan, the emperor of Mongolia in the 1200s, is quite famous as well for his consumption of yogurt. He actually made his army consume yogurt purely because he believed that yogurt would instill bravery into his warriors. I'm not really sure how, I'm not really sure why he believed it, but he believed it. And so they would have to eat a big bowl of yogurt before going out to fight because that would make them braver. The other famous historical ruler when it comes to yogurt is actually King Francois of France in the 1500s. And he is credited with yogurt because he formed an alliance with the Turks and parts of the Middle East. And he was introduced to yogurt when he had a bout of diarrhea. So his Turkish comrades actually gave him some of this fermented dairy product, yogurt, thickened, coagulated milk product, and that actually helped to alleviate some of the symptoms he had. Now, being French being the French, they make everything decadent and delicious. He went back to France and started eating yogurt, but with the addition of cinnamon and honey and fruits, and made it more into a dessert type food. So now it's gone from being bland and just a coagulated food because of fermentation and because we don't have a refrigerator and, being associated with skin sunburn and tummy troubles and the runs, to now being a dessert because it's got a nice creamy texture about it. So he made it taste a bit more palatable. However, it wasn't until Louis Pasteur entered the world in the 1800s, the father of microbiology. He did find out about bacteria and all of those sort of the actual process of fermentation and how bacteria go about fermenting. And even though Louis Pasteur was the first person to discover that and make those sort of discoveries, it was one of his students. Now, I'm probably going to say this name wrong. Stamen Grigorov, who actually discovered the bacterial species Lactobacillus subspecies bulgaricus. Now, why this is so important is this particular bacteria, bulgaricus, is the bacteria that he found in yogurt that the Bulgarians were consuming. So we got some of their yogurt and actually wanted to understand what are the bacteria, which ones are they, that is actually causing milk to go from a liquid into this thickened, coagulated food product. What's that bacteria and how does it do it? And he's the one who discovered Lactobacillus subspecies bulgaricus. Now, what's interesting about this particular type of bacteria, it is the only one that is named after a region in the world. Bulgaricus, named after Bulgaria. And it is also the only one that is still used in traditional European yogurts. And so if you look at your tub of yogurt, you may sometimes, depending on the brand and the type of yogurt it is, you will see Lactobacillus subspecies bulgaricus. And it does give European or Greek style yogurts that semi-sour, distinct flavor profile. So really interesting. He discovered the bulgaricus bacteria in the yogurt that the Bulgarians were eating. And at the same time, Professor Ilya Mechnikov, a zoologist, was doing his research at the same time. And his research was really all into trying to work out how are these populations living for so long? What are they doing why do they have such a proportion of centenarians in these villages in Bulgaria? And he noted that they quite often ate 3 or more serves of yogurt that had the bulgaricus bacteria in it that Stamen had just recently discovered. So he proposed that it is the bacteria that is in the yogurt that actually has a beneficial effect on human health, and it's allowing these people to live into their hundreds of years of age, over the age of 100. Now, modern day medical researchers have found that it's not just that. Yes, they do eat a lot of yogurt. They eat plain fermented yogurt that they actually make themselves at least 3 times a day, served with breadcrumbs or mixed with a whole lot of garlic. So it's not a dessert food for them. They just eat it all throughout the day. Their main sources of protein is from dairy milk, cheese, and yogurt, not so much from red meat. It's a very small proportion of their diet. Lots of plant-based foods, but they also move a lot. They farm a lot, so they're not living the sedentary type of lifestyle. They just have a very traditional, non-Western, non-modern type of lifestyle. They sleep when their body's tired. They usually sleep for over 12 hours. But it is interesting to note that, yes, they do eat at least, on a minimum, 3 serves of yogurt every single day. So whilst Professor Ilya's ideology that it's yogurt that makes people live over the age of 100 is a little bit off, there's more factors than just that. He's the one who made this link. Bacteria is in the yogurt and they're eating a lot of it. Could it be that the bacteria that's in the yogurt is having a beneficial effect in the body? And that's where the terminology probiotic came into existence. Now, one of the more famous Bulgarians that you may have heard of, for example, is this lovely man over here, Dobri Dobrev. He is one of the more famous Bulgarians because he apparently walked over 20 kilometers every single day up until the days that he died when he was 103 in 2013. He used to walk over 20 kilometers per day one way and over 20 kilometers one way back in the opposite direction to get home as a way to raise money for charitable causes. And he became known as the saint of the particular village that he was from. But yeah, he died at the age of 103, and right up until the time he was nearing death, he would walk at least 40 Ks a day. That's a pretty big effort for any single human being, let alone a person in their 80s, 90s, and in his case, 101, 102, 103. So interesting note, he did actually, they have documented him also eating at least 3 serves of yogurt with garlic and breadcrumbs. I think it's just because it's a staple. So in a lot of European countries, yogurt and fermented milk products are a staple. And yes, they do have bacteria in it. And that bacteria does ferment the product. So it goes from a liquid into this thick, creamy type product that has living bacteria in it. But what does that have to do with us and our digestive tract? Well, here is our digestive tract, and we'll have a look at it, and we'll start off with the stomach. So the stomach is that balloon right at the top. Got the esophagus coming down into the stomach, and then it heads off into the small intestine, which looks like really condensed, squiggly sausage packed into a tight area. And then surrounding that is a striated, big, fat, lined, thick sausage. And that is actually our colon or our large bowel. Now, if we start at the stomach, we have, first thing we have to realize is the stomach is highly acidic. So it is between a pH of 1 to 2, very acidic. And it does also contain some enzymes, pepsin and amylase, which comes from the salivary glands, and also mucus is being produced. So pepsin is, helps to break down proteins, and amylase helps to break down carbohydrates. And then we've got all of this really strong HCl, hydrochloric acid, being produced in our stomach that helps to break food down, and then it churns it and it smashes it up, kind of like a washing machine, into small particles. From there, the broken up food digester goes into our small intestine. It starts off with the duodenum. Halfway point is roughly called the jejunum, great names, and by the time it gets to the end of the small intestine, it's called the ileum. And the ileum is right near the side of the colon, and you can see the appendix. The appendix, which is that little point that is sticking out just above my finger at the moment. Yep, that is the appendix, which is attached to the start of the colon, and you can see the small intestine, which just comes off to the right of that. So if I make it big again, the small intestine has a dramatic pH change. So we go from the stomach, which is very acidic, which is 1 to 2, and then we enter into the small intestine, which starts off about in the mid 5s to nearly 6. And by the time it works its way through the small intestine, it gets to the end and it's roughly at about 7. And then in the colon, it starts off with a pH of about 5. And by the time it ends up being a bit neutral. By the time it gets to the rectum and the anus, we're talking at about a pH 7. Now, in the small intestine, again, we do have pancreatic acid that helps to break down our food components. There's some bile salts, which helps to emulsify fat. And we're also producing more mucus. We also have lipase enzyme. Lipase enzyme helps to break down lipids or fats. And so this is taking place in the small intestine. Now, the small intestine also has things called villi. So you can see the small intestine is a squiggly sausage that's quite compacted in there. The small intestine is roughly about 6 meters long. Yeah, 6 meters packed into this little area down there. Think about the height of an average man, 1.85 meters, versus a male giraffe. A male giraffe is 6 meters tall. So you have the length of a male giraffe in terms of your small intestine packed in your torso. Now, within that small intestine, we've got things called villi. So the villi look like finger protrusions, and it lines the inside of the small intestine. And then on top of those villi is things called microvilli. So teeny tiny microscopic little finger protrusions. And the reason for that is it increases the surface area inside the small intestine. So as the digested food particles is moving through, you've got this massive surface area of intestinal wall that allows nutrients to be absorbed across the intestinal wall and into our bloodstream so that it can go and be beneficial, help our cells grow, do whatever it needs to do in our body, right? So we've got that. We've got our enzymes, we've got a change in pH, we've got absorption taking place. It's quite a rigorous system. 6 meters of it to get through until we get to our bacteria, to our colon. Now our colon, it starts off ascending, so that's going up. Then we've got transverse, which is going across. And then we've got the descending colon, which is obviously heading down before it gets into the rectum and then out through the anus. Now, the main thing that takes place during the colon is both bacterial fermentation of whatever food gets into it and also absorption of water and electrolytes so that we can pass out big, bulky stools. Okay, good thing. We want to have big, bulky stools. Now, it's really important to realize that the bulk of our bacteria live in our colon. So if we have a look at the boxes on the right, we can see that the further up towards the mouth we go is where we have aerobic bacteria, because obviously aerobic bacteria need oxygen. However, the further away from our mouth and the closer to the other end of the line is more anaerobic bacteria. And anaerobic bacteria simply means bacteria that don't need oxygen to grow and survive. So our colon is an anaerobic environment. Now, if you look at the bacterial numbers, right? Starting off with the stomach, there can be some bacteria in that environment, but it's a small amount. Pretty much lactobacilli and streptococci, but if we look at the number 10 to the power of 3, so write 10 on a piece of paper and then put 3 zeros after it. That's up to that amount of bacteria that can grow. If we go into the small intestine, we see the numbers are starting to increase. So we've got 10 to the power of 4 to 7. So again, put 10 on a piece of paper and then draw 4 zeros or 7 zeros afterwards. And that's going to give you the ballpark figure of how much bacteria we can have growing in that environment. Mainly lactobacilli, but there can be some pathological bacteria like E. coli or Enterococcus fecalis, and those types of bacteria, the pathogenic ones, are associated with things like diarrhea or upset tummy or dysentery, things like that. Once we get down into the colon, you see that the number of bacteria has increased exponentially. So we've got 10 to the power of 10 all the way to 10 to the power of 12. So we're talking about trillions of bugs, trillions of bacteria. Lactic acid producing bacteria, so that's bugs that actually produce lactic acid, which is what drops the pH down. Bacteroids, bifidobacterium, which is highly beneficial. They're good bugs, they're healthy bugs, they're bugs that we want. And the numbers of those are extremely high in our colon. So, really important thing to understand is that in order to get to the colon, food needs to get through our stomach, through 6 meters of our small intestine, and then work its way through the different segments of our colon to produce a beneficial effect on our bacteria. Now, if we have a look at this particular slide, I thought this explains it really nice and easily on the role of bacteria, our good healthy bacteria, our probiotic type bacteria, what that actually does in our colon and how it may have different types of beneficial effects in our body. So if we look at the first column, the blue rectangles are the probiotic bacteria. and the pink colored rectangles are the potentially pathogenic bacteria. What the bacteria produce, the pathogenic bacteria produce, is inhibitory substances. So those are substances that can cause our cells to not work optimally. Okay, they inhibit certain functions from taking place. So what the probiotic bacteria do is they essentially neutralize those substances that are being produced. They prevent those substances from having an effect on our cells or on other bacteria, and keep it all under control. In column number 2, it shows another way that our beneficial bacteria work, where they actually prevent pathogenic bacteria from adhesing or getting stuck on to our cells that line our colon. So we have pathogenic bacteria that become attached to our colon cell walls. They can start to grow and they can lead to lesions or lead to tumoral growths, things like that. So our beneficial bacteria stop them from attaching and stop them from causing any damage to our actual organ. In number 3, we've got nutrient competition and production. So what this means is that, yes, there's different nutrients, obviously, coming into the colon. Whatever has not been broken down by the stomach and absorbed by the small intestine will end up in the colon. So yeah, there are nutrients that do get into the colon. So what happens with the beneficial probiotic bacteria? They actually absorb or attract these nutrients and they use it to grow. And in doing so, they decrease the amount of nutrients that are available for pathogenic bacteria to grow. And so eventually those numbers of pathogenic bacteria either decrease or they die. They get smaller in the amount that is in our colon. Column number 4, we have degradation of toxins and toxin receptors. So pathogenic bacteria can produce things called toxins, and toxins are exactly that. They are toxic. So too much nitrogenous byproduct, for example, is toxic in our colon. We don't want to have too much of those types of byproducts because that can cause damages to the cells in our organ. Now, what the probiotic bacteria can do is they can actually degrade those toxins. They can also degrade any receptors that may be on the lumen wall of our gut, so that these toxins cannot be absorbed into our body. And then column number 5, it's believed, and there's strong evidence on the role of beneficial gut bacteria, probiotic bacteria, on assisting our immune response. So they actually help our body's immune system produce antibodies in the antigen present cells. And that's really important to fight off infection. So they can have a role in stimulating that immune response. So pretty fascinating in what they can and cannot do. Okay, our bacteria, our beneficial bacteria do a whole lot of stuff. And we know that they're involved in these things. We're understanding the mechanisms in a greater way, but they're involved in so much more. So much more. Now, I'm pretty sure we've all heard of antibiotics, and most of us, if not all of us, have taken antibiotics at some stage or the other. Now, anti is against, and biotic means life, so anti-life. And antibiotics, in this case, we're talking about the life of bacteria, pathogenic bacteria. Now, there are times when, sometimes you need to take an antibiotic because there is too much pathogenic bacteria. You may have got an infection from something like bacterial meningitis. If you got too much of that bacteria getting into the meninges of your brain, that can cause inflammation and lead to meningococcal disease and all sorts of things. So they give you an antibiotic for that. And what the antibiotic does is it destroys both the pathogenic bacteria, but it also knocks out all the good stuff as well, right? It knocks all of them out. And so that's why antibiotics are beneficial, but only for a short period of time. And usually when you take an antibiotic, the doctor or the pharmacist will also suggest that you take a probiotic capsule 2 hours afterwards. Because if you take it at the same time, if you take like an Inner Health Plus at the same time as your antibiotic, you're just defeating the purpose. The antibiotic is going to kill all the good bacteria in that capsule. So you take it about 2 hours later and you can still get some healthy bacteria from the capsule, helping your digestive tract to keep chugging on until you're off that medication. So that is what antibiotics can do. If we take antibiotics for a prolonged period of time, that's not beneficial to our own healthy bugs, and it can also cause things like antibiotic resistance, which is never beneficial either, because that allows pathogenic bacteria to keep growing and resist the antibiotics. Okay, so that's antibiotics. What about probiotics? Well, probiotics, by definition, according to the FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization, and the World Health Organization, are defined as live microorganisms which, when administered in adequate amounts, confer a health benefit on the host. All right, so you are a host. I am a host. We are hosts. Our body is a host to living bacteria. Those bugs live inside of us. It's kind of interesting when you think of it like that. You're a host, I'm a host. And probiotics are live microorganisms that if we take it at a high enough dose, that's really important. It has to be live and it has to be at a high enough dose to elicit a health outcome on the actual host. Now, probiotics can be quite inexpensive. They're relatively safe, free of long-term negative side effects, and have already been demonstrated to have beneficial effects on the digestive tract or on treating other types of issues in the body. So certain bacterial populations, such as lactic acid producing bacteria, have been shown to produce a positive health impact. They have been shown to both improve our gut's microflora, improve the type of healthy bacteria that we all have there, and also can be advantageous in the prevention of certain diseases, especially in, diarrheal type diseases and further implications in our immune system. Now, some of these probiotics are naturally occurring organisms, but they got to be live, that are found in foods like milk, like yogurt. They have to be live though. And so we know that in yogurt type products, they are live. We know in Yakult that they are live, but they may also be extracted and put into a capsule, like an Inner Health Plus type food product. So these types of products are very common in the general marketplace with probiotic microorganisms that produce lactic acid bacteria, bifidobacteria, the bacteria subspecies that we find in our yogurts, the Shirota strain that's in Yakult, Acidophilus bifidus and KCI, they're the main ones that you get in yogurt, but also Bulgaricus as well. And they're important because they help to improve our own gut microbiota. So probiotics have been suggested to achieve a protective effect by actually interacting with carcinogens. So those pathogenic bacteria that I was showing you in the previous slide. Let me show it. Bring it back up again. Where is it? Yeah. So they have been shown, the blue little probiotic bacteria have been shown to have a protective effect by interacting with the little pink squares, the pathogenic bacteria, or otherwise known as carcinogens, preventing damage to our intestinal wall and things like that. So they do have a really, really, really important role in the body. But the key thing that you have to take home from this is that they are live microorganisms, probiotics, live microorganisms. I don't care if the bacteria were there, but if they're dead, they're not alive anymore. So they're live microorganisms, and you have to take it in a sufficient dose to actually get a health benefit. But you got to realize that those bacteria that's live has to get from your mouth through down your esophagus, through your 1 to 2 pH stomach, through your 6 meters long worth of small intestine in order to get to your colon where it can exert that beneficial outcome. All right? So just remember that. That is our probiotics. Now, the FAO and the WHO also came up with a framework for probiotic products a couple of years ago, and this was published in Nature. And as you can see, probiotics have to be live bacteria, live cultures, and they split it up into 2 groups. Firstly, a probiotic group, and then a not probiotic group. So looking at the probiotic group, the pink area, this indicates the type of products that can use the terminology probiotic. They could be probiotic drugs or like your Inner Health Plus type capsule, all the way through to baby formula that actually has probiotic strains, live bacteria added to it. There can be dietary supplements, there can be probiotic foods like our yogurts, like our Yakults, like our kefir. And then if we have a look at our not probiotic products, we're talking about fermented foods with an undefined microbial content. So yes, those foods are fermented, but they have not yet measured the number and the type of bacteria that's in it and if they are alive. So that could be things like our sauerkraut or our kimchi. If it has not been measured that there is live bacteria and the number of bacteria and the type of bacteria, that kind of fits into that category. Okay? Not saying that we're against it, it's just it hasn't been adequately measured and defined yet. The other type of not probiotic type of product includes fecal microbiota transplants. So fecal microbiota transplants are definitely a thing, and there is quite a bit of research in this space where a fecal transplant is taken from a healthy host and transplanted into a person who has got digestive discomfort diseases to help balance their bacterial status again. And usually the host is a parent, right? So you take some poopies because that's where your bacteria are, right? I can't take it from my blood. I've got to take my live bacteria from that organ. So that's where the fecal transfer comes in. Take it from a healthy host and insert it into a person who is in need of healthy microflora in their colon. Now, that could be a direct fecal transfer, or some research groups are looking at making it into capsules, taking it, cleaning it in inverted brackets, making sure that it's purified, but maintaining the bacterial numbers, making it into capsules so you orally ingest it, goes through your stomach, goes through your small intestine, ends up in your colon, and then it's released from the capsule. But yes, there is still a lot of research in this space because, you've got to take a fecal transplant from someone. You've got to make sure that there aren't any other pathogenic bacteria in it, any other type of microorganisms, like screening that to ensure that you're not transferring potentially other sicknesses or diseases or causing more health problems in the person who already has a compromised health system. So yes, watch this space. Fecal transplants will definitely be coming. Do I like them? I totally am all for them. Go fecal transplants. Not that I've had one, but I think it's really important. If there is healthy bacteria and I'm going to get it from a host that's related to me, so that'd be my mom or dad, and I need it because I need my bacteria. And if, for whatever reason, my own bacteria has depleted, I'm having a lot of issues with irritable bowel or ulcerative colitis, and I need to get those numbers back up again, I will take those bacteria from my healthy host donor. Just like you take blood donors, just like we do those types of donations, plasma donations, pretty soon, once we work it all out, we will have fecal bacterial donors. I hope. Now, when it comes to prebiotics, what exactly are we talking about when it comes to prebiotics? So, in the simplest of terms, prebiotics is bacteria food. Okay, it's healthy bacteria food. Now, the FAO and the WHO have actually defined prebiotic as a non-viable food component that confers a health benefit on the host associated with a modulation of the microbiota. What a fantastic definition. Non-viable food component. First part. What that means, it is a component of food that has not been absorbed in the small intestine. So we have obviously not been able to utilize it for nutritional benefit. It has been, or it may not have been broken down by the stomach, and it has not been absorbed in the small intestine, which means it has ended up in our colon. But it has to have a health benefit on the host. It has to be able to improve the health of our own microbiota. So those types of food products are then fermented. So anything that is not absorbed in the small intestine will end up in the colon. So if you ate a diet of just Pringles every single day, like, yes, you're going to get some carbohydrate out of it, you're going to get some sodium out of it, and you're going to get some fats out of it, and there's probably a teensy amount of proteins in there as well. You're going to get some of these nutrients out there, but at the end of the day, a lot of it will end up in your colon, and you'll know that because you got to go to the toilet and poop it out. So whatever you pooped out is what your body hasn't used, okay? That's just it. However, a diet of just Pringles is probably not the best diet for your gut bacteria. Bacteria ferment anything that comes in there. That's just how they operate. That's how they work. And so whatever has some sort of carbon in it, in its chemistry, it will use for fermentation, and that stimulates its growth and its metabolism. So different types of food products have a different effect on our bacteria. Now, the prebiotics are the ones that have the beneficial effect on our bacteria. They're the beneficial food that our bacteria get to eat. And a lot of the prebiotics are really fibrous in nature. So fiber from fruits and vegetables, fiber from grains, fiber from nuts, fiber from seeds, fiber from legumes. These are all different types of fibers: arabinoxylans, pectins, celluloses, which is something I'll talk about in a different webisode. But this is the optimal food that your bacteria enjoy eating. This is the optimal food that the bugs love to eat. It stimulates their growth. It stimulates their colonization. It decreases the amount of non-pathogenic microorganisms because more of the good bacteria start to grow. So you may have heard of things like oligosaccharides, resistant starch, those sort of components. Those types of components we don't absorb in our small intestine, so they end up in our colon and our bacteria get to eat it. So plant-based foods on the whole are generally associated with being healthy bacteria food, all right? Healthy bacteria food. Dietary fiber is not just about big bulky stools, although it is about big bulky stools. Dietary fiber is not just about cleaning your bowels out and keeping you regular, even though it does keep you regular, all right? It's not just about that. Yes, it does scour out the gunk and it cleans out your intestines, which is fantastic. And yes, you do get big bulky stools, which is easy to pass out. Fantastic. But dietary fiber is the perfect food for your bacteria to eat. And you remember, your bugs don't get a choice. They can only eat what you give them to eat. So whatever you eat, they'll end up with the leftovers that your intestines don't want. So choose wisely. feed your bacteria food that is beneficial to them and that they enjoy eating. That's high in fibrous material. Lastly, we have symbiotics. So a synbiotic, S-Y-N, biotic, is where we have a compound that is both a probiotic, so a healthy bacteria, beneficial bacteria, combined with a prebiotic, so healthy bug food. Healthy bug food, all together in one compound. That is a symbiotic. Now, there's a lot of research and a lot of development taking place in the symbiotic arena. Functional ingredients that can be used in yogurt, in breads, in cereals, in staple food items, which is really, really, really exciting. So not only do you get the benefit of the bacteria, but you also get the food that the bug needs to eat or that the bacteria in our own digestive tract need to eat. Symbiotics coming to a food product near you in the next couple of years. I'm calling it right now. I reckon in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see a lot more of symbiotics taking place as these functional ingredients start to come into fruition. So, thank you very much for watching. There is a bunch of references to my right. Go onto Google Scholar, look them up, have a read of those papers if you're interested in understanding a bit more about it. But if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. Subscribe down below, send me your questions directly or post them down there, and I will definitely try and get back to you as soon as I possibly can. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've got something out of it. The biggest takeaway points that I want you to understand and remember is that, firstly, probiotics is healthy bacteria that we can ingest in sufficient numbers that will have a beneficial impact on our gut bacteria. Prebiotics is actual bug food, okay? It's not live microorganisms. It's food that we consume that our bacteria can eat and grow, but it's healthy bug food, all right? That's number 2. And point number 3, anything that happens to our bacteria has to get through our stomach, which is at pH 1 to 2, very acidic, get through 6 meters worth of small intestine, which starts off at a roughly 5.5 all the way through to a pH of 7 before it ends up in our colon. So if you're doing product development and stuff like that, and you're looking at bacteria and probiotics, prebiotics, and you want to put it into your food product, you got to realize that that functional ingredient has to withstand the digestive tract processing. And our stomach is pretty tough, and our small intestine is very long. And anywhere along that journey, it can break down, like literally be broken down by enzymes or by changes in acidity or by just how the stomach mechanically processes. So it has to be able to last the stomach. It has to last the small intestine. And then it has to be able to get into the colon. And if you want it to be fermented by bacteria in the descending colon, then it's got to get through the start and the middle in order to get down to the bottom. So keep that in mind. Bacteria is not as simple as just take a supplement, all right? You get to feed your bacteria. You have bacteria. You've got a whole range of different bacteria, good ones and bad ones. The aim is for you to feed your bacteria healthy bug food. If you feed your own bacteria healthy bug food, your healthy bugs will grow. So probiotics, live bugs. Prebiotics, bug food. And for anything outside of that, it needs to get through the stomach, it needs to get through the small intestine in order for it to have a beneficial impact on our bacteria. Thanks so much for joining me today. I hope you really enjoyed that. I love the gut microbiota, and I'm going to do a couple more of these webisodes talking about the role of particle size, dietary fiber, the different types of fibers, cooking versus raw, a puree or a smoothie versus a big bowl of salad. Which one's better? Which is better bug food? Stay tuned. That will be up in the next webisode. Thanks very much, guys. Bye.